Okay. Are we able to hear me? Are we working okay, Peter?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep. Yeah, it seems to be okay now.
Okay, so I don't know whether we've got any of our other mentors here. Any other mentors online?
Not that I know of.
Okay, that's cool. Say hi if you are. Okay, thanks. I hope you're well. I'm looking into tree growth regulators decades ago and didn't use them for various reasons. I'm wondering about Cambusat, as it seems like it may have some uses. Um, is there an industry consensus on this product? Um, yes, I think overall there's a consensus on growth regulators, but I was asked this question recently by a company out of the US because it's also used to stimulate root growth post-transplant. And I tell the story, and I apologize, but it will help you understand about the man who was complaining about the relationship with his wife not being so good. So he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Look, just pop one of these pills in a dinner, and things will change." So that night he goes home and cooks dinner. Well, that's enough to make a big change to start off with, and he pops one in a dinner, and he looks at them and says, "Well, I'll have a couple in mine." And so he puts a couple in his, and nothing happens. He goes off to bed a little bit dejected, and he wakes up in the middle of, she wakes up, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and she's yelling, "I want a man, I want a man." And he says, "So do I, so do I." And the point of it is dose and hormones are things that are really difficult things to play with. It's difficult for human beings. We know less when it comes to trees. And they're a little bit more complex in some ways in the way they work in plants. So we've got to be very careful in how we use these things. So follow the recommendations that come with the instructions. Yes, some power line companies are using it. There have been trials done, and there's a Rainbow Tree Care, Rainbow Environmental. If you're interested, that at the moment they're looking for someone to head up their division here in Australia and start promoting and working with these chemicals. So just like with human hormones, the results that you want may not always be the results you get. So, for example, too much of testosterone will help you grow breasts. Well, that's not really what you want, is it? Not if you're a guy. Maybe you do. Nowadays, I get confused by all that stuff. But for most of us, we think of testosterone as building muscle, which it does. But it also has this side effect that we don't want. Do we know enough about it to be confident when and how to use it? Where it's been tested and there is supporting data, yes. And there's some great supporting data out of places like Bartlett Laboratories, Morton Arboretum. So lots of places have played with these growth regulators. So I don't have any issues with it. Would it be used in bonsai? The answer is generally not. That's like saying, can we have a maths competition and use calculators? Although that is becoming the norm. I mean, in the old days, you didn't use a calculator or a computer to do the maths competition. You used your brain. So correct pruning of bonsais is what makes bonsais work. Not so much the application of a hormone, but the manipulation of the natural hormones within the plant. Can it be misused? Yes, horribly. I've seen photographs of disasters. And so that's why I say you want to be careful to follow the instructions, make sure it's something that's been tested in terms of your plant material before you apply it. Yes, look, there have been several trials in Australia. I don't know of any supporting research things with it, but I would refer you to the Utility Arborists Association and someone from the UAAA. And as a suggestion, someone like Craig Hallam might be a person worthwhile giving a call to. He fits in that nice in-between zone between consulting and utility. So he may be someone that's worthwhile talking to get some direction. And as I said, um, Rainbow Tree Care, Tom Prosser in particular, the principal, is somebody that would be worthwhile having a chin wag with about that. So Graham, is Graham online? That's Graham down there.
Yeah, now.
Yeah. Any other questions you have on that?
Not really, no. I think I'll just keep asking around and learn what I can about it. I don't have the need to use it immediately, but
Yeah,
I can see that it's got potential.
It's definitely got potential. It's definitely got potential in utility work because it improves your pruning cycle, extends that out. Same with hedging, where they're using it on hedging. And then that one I refer you to Glyn Percival at Bartlett Labs in the UK. Glyn's done some great work on looking at that, looking at, how with appropriate management and dosage rates, you can significantly reduce your cycle between hedging. And if you're getting, a reasonably quick growing plant, something like Syzygium or something like that, that could be quite a useful management tool. But with always, Graham, absolute care, because now you're playing around with a hormone or a hormone suppressant. So in either case, we've got to be very careful, human or otherwise, in playing with those chemicals. So the next question. Hi, Peter. Question asked for tonight regarding a red box eucalyptus polyanthemus. The tree has been declining for a couple of years, and I'm interested to ask whether the use of potash on the tennis court located above the tree to control moss could be an issue. I would have to reference the toxicity levels for potassium, because that's essentially what we're worried about when it comes to potash. But I'd be surprised. So that would be my gut level feeling. Mind you, I'd be looking at other methods of controlling the moss as well, and I'm sure there's some others out there that are effective. Regularly and in small doses, yes. Look, it's fairly mobile, so as I said, my gut level guess is it's probably not an issue. Also,
excuse me, Mark.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Is potash very alkaline?
Yeah, look, it is alkaline, but I don't think the volume you need to change pH significantly is quite high, and they won't be applying it in those sort of levels. And again, from a contrast, if potash was an issue, then post-fire we'd often see similar problems, whereas post-fire we often see accelerated growth. So I suspect not. But that's just my gut level feeling. What would I do to find out more? And that's a really good exercise for us, I think, to just look at now. I'd go and do a number of questions. So let's look at the pH of potash. It depends on the type of potash. It can range from 4.5 to 13.5. 13.5 is fairly alkaline, but the amount that you'd be using would be fairly low. So that would be my gut level guess on that. Potash poisoning. Yeah, well, spelled incorrectly, but that's okay. Potash plant poisoning. I don't think we'll find much. Potassium toxicity in plants. There we are. And I said we go down to potassium. They want me to accept. I don't know what's happened there. but you saw the symptoms of it. Potassium toxicity in plants. One way you could get an idea of whether there was something like that is just to do an EC test or a soil test. Either would start to give you some idea of what you're looking at, but you're looking at necrosis and discoloration on the tip. Of course, without being silly here, we have a cannabis image, and cannabis, of course, is a very important crop commercially. Wish that it weren't, but it gives you an idea again of the sort of things we're looking at. But it's, as I said, it's a fairly mobile chemical, so I just don't see that as being a likely cause. That's not saying it can't be. That's just my gut level feeling. And so with just that little bit of research, of course, we could do a little bit more reading. But if I wasn't seeing some chlorotic effects and tip diebacks, then I would probably be saying I'm less concerned about it being potassium toxicity. Is that a fair and reasoned position?
Yeah, I think so.
What about if there's a lot of the tree's root mass under the tennis court, and it may be that the potassium would interfere with the uptake of water by the roots?
Okay, deplasmolysis is what you're talking about, where the salt levels are so high that you start to affect the plant.
Yeah, the water goes the wrong way.
Yeah, deplasmolysis. So you could potentially get there, but that would be solved as a bit of a quick research with just an EC meter. And EC meters, electrical conductivity meters, will give you an idea whether you're at salt levels that are likely to be toxic. I'm just curious as to potash for the control, of moss, because I've never heard of it before. Yeah.
Yeah, so just the background on that, Mark, it's a synthetic tennis court, and they obviously get moss in it, so they've been putting regular applications of potash, they say at low rates. This is a remnant tree that, they've built gardens and tennis courts and all sorts of things around over the years, but, there's a lawn area around the tree that had been 15 metres plus in some directions, so it could be a cumulative effect. I couldn't really find much wrong with it, like no borer activity or whatever. There are some harlequin beetles around, or bugs around, and a couple other small insects under the bark, but there was no evidence of borer activity as compared to another tree out in the paddock which was riddled with it. So it's even where they remove some of the dead wood, there's no, the tree's solid. Like it's still a beautiful big old tree, but they're just they're really keen gardeners and farmers, and they want to try and preserve it as best they can.
Okay, good. First thing, you see me just doing some quick flicking around at the same time. First thing I notice is that there's no evidence that potash will reduce moss in their synthetic lawns. So that's the first bit. Next one is there is a citrus extract that is effective against moss, highly effective. Orange peel extract is essentially what it is, but you can buy it as a fluid. Kogan sells it, D-limonene. And you saw here, I just pulled it up, there's 30% D-limonene. You'd want to get something that was actually made for it. At 2% concentration kills moss and algae, but does not affect turf or plants.
Okay.
So, and that's just one that I pulled out straight away out of the US, out of Oregon. So I'll just pull up to the top of it so you can see the title of that. So yes, I understand why they want to get or manage the moss. I'm just not sure that they're managing it with the right chemical.
Yeah.
It is interesting to note that one of the articles that did come up was talking about how potash effectively helps eliminate moss by encouraging root and grass overall development. So I'm guessing that certainly at the prescribed levels, potash is not going to be an issue for our tree. So
Are they using selective herbicides on the lawn around it, Dave?
No, I asked them all that, and they said they weren't. They're pretty, they're pretty keen farmers and keen gardeners, and the woman's, seems to be quite in tune with the garden and their farm, like their beef cattle growers as well, and they seem to manage their property quite well. And they said they've used no selective broadleaf herbicide or anything around the tree, and even on they said one paddock, but that was sort of half a K away. So unless it's drifted on, which I guess is possible, but she seemed to think that was unlikely.
Not the levels that would cause harm. The one of the things that I have learned is that customers sometimes find things hard to put together in their mind, and I've had on a number of occasions a customer say, no, we don't use any herbicides or anything else, and then you talk to them about what they've done to control the bindii in their lawn, and they say, oh yes, we use weed and feed, or we use once a year path weeder on the path. So again, just a couple more times in those areas. I would suggest that they look at changing from potash to control, and see whether you can find a product registered for the control of moss in Australia. But if not, you're in Victoria, so you can do things that we can't do here. You could go for the fact that there's already efficacy data. You've got the application rates, so you can go ahead and say, look, here's some alternatives.
Yep.
So,
sure.
And there's plenty more there, lawn care forums and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Here, Yates surrender moss killer controls moss, algae, liverwort, and lichen. So it's safe around ornamental plants. So something like that might be a better alternative. Check the LD50. I think all know how to do that. Make sure it's not something that's going to be a problem to your client. But yeah, there's stuff there that's, in my mind, more applicable to controlling the moss. The next thing is what to do about the tree. Stimulate the tree back to good health as far as possible. What would you do?
I basically suggested mulch and water, maybe a half strength, liquid fertilizer or something like that.
Yep. I think that's all appropriate. Realistically, the root system's hard to see, hard to know what's going on. Look for signs of general dieback, but again, there's a tennis court certainly somewhere near it that's had some disturbance, probably. One of the things that does get used in synthetic grass production is a broadleaf barrier, broadleaf herbicide. Sometimes it's granular and stable. Other times it's applied on to stop any grasses or anything underneath. So depending on when the tennis court was built, that may have some impact.
Okay.
But once the tennis court's built, any granular herbicide, pre-emergent herbicides, things like Castoron G, they're fairly stable in the soil. So, but I was involved in a case year before last, where a school lost 12 of its trees as a result of chemical management underneath the artificial grass that went down. So, worthwhile following up on that one. Anyone else got any ideas for David? No. Okay, well, that was too easy.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that your Hemiptera is a harlequin bug. Have you tried Google?
Did Google Lens, and that's what I came up with, harlequin bug, and there was something else, but I was sort of on the run this morning when I sent the email.
Okay, might just nail down that a bit more than what you have. It certainly is Hemiptera, but I'm not sure that it's a harlequin bug. So it may have some effect. If you're concerned about it, start looking at predatory environment. And, this is one of those weird and wonderful things where we start altering our ecosystems. Understory trees are important in the control of insects in upper story trees because they're important for birds, and birds are an important controller. So getting the combination, the mix right, is really important.
Yep.
So again, maybe there's a need to look at longer term, doing something like some understory planting if they've got the opportunity to have some gardens there. And again, try and drill down and identify on what the actual insect is.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, let's attempt to do it now. There's no point. So we've got this little insect here. It's definitely Hemiptera. Save as picture. Yep, save. Oh, it needs a name.
I came up with harlequin cabbage bug.
Yeah, but it's not. That's the problem. Under probability, it's not going to be something that fits in that neatly and nicely for you. So here we are. There it is. And so we're going to ask, search for Google Lens, because I've got it set up to do that. I'm going to come down and just make sure we narrow in on the insect.
Yeah, she was saying that there's quite a lot of them. There's some yuccas nearby, and they're living in the yuccas. But she's saying, "Oh, should I get the yuccas?" But I don't know if that's the issue either.
Just giving it as Didymus versicolor, which it calls a harlequin bug. And we can grab some information on that fairly quickly. So it's going to cause some problems in some fruit. We don't care a damn about that. So it suggests it's a problem in apples. Let's see if it's a problem in eucalypts. So we've got here, and let's put in eucalyptus. And we've got a bit of stuff from AI. AI is just becoming so much fun. So it says manage the host weeds early in their development to control the populations. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem on eucalypts. So I'm thinking that's just one of those incidental things that's there.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And, again, we've got to understand that we deal with a huge range of really complex organisms and trees, and a whole pile of things that affect them, to the point that, our likelihood of knowledge of all of it's fairly small, but just to get some broad brushstrokes is often all that we need. So Hemiptera is a sap-sucking insects. By sap, remember, I think we've talked about this before, sap could be the cytosol of the cell, the inside, the fluidy bits inside the the cell. It could be glucose, sucrose from the phloem. It could be xylem in the case of cicadas. So it means different things. But, the number that you'd need to cause problems on eucalypt would just be horrendous.
Yeah, I didn't see that many, but there were certainly there, but they weren't in plague proportions, unless they've sort of thinned out a bit. But yeah.
Yeah, look, be phenomenal proportions. When you consider the numbers that cicadas get to, and they only have a small impact on tree. Now they're xylem feeding, they're after water, but they've been on the root system for 4 or 5 years to 6 or 7 years beforehand, depleting water that whole time. So, you don't often see a tree that's been killed by cicadas. So they're a lot bigger insect than the harlequin bug.
Yep. It's interesting what you were saying before about, clients not realising what they've done around trees. And I sort of said to her that, look, you've built a tennis court above it. So you've changed the available water for the tree. You've put gardens around it. You've put a pathway, sort of around one side. It's long-term impacts on the tree potentially, and that have taken years to manifest. So
I have a slightly different view there, David. And my view is that the impact of screwing up with root systems is seen quicker rather than slower. And what you'll see then is either a downward spiral or no effect, or an upward spiral, depending on how the problem's managed. And so if she's been seeing it go down over years, the tennis courts may be a contributing factor. But frequently, we sort of say, oh, look, the damage is from 10 or 15 years ago. After 10 or 15 years, in most circumstances, unless something is really extreme, a tree is dealt with that well and truly. And roots are highly ephemeral, the absorbing part. We're talking 6 or 8 weeks.
Okay.
So, some woody roots will have been damaged. Some interface problems will have been created. All of those things all have an impact. But, if the decline isn't quickly associated with the tree, it's unlikely, it's unlikely to be associated in the long term, with some exceptions. There is an interface created, that is, where they put that court down, it may well be that water is no longer getting into the ground below and it's getting dry there.
But Mark, if the area under the tennis court becomes unavailable to the tree roots, wouldn't the tree just go and grow somewhere else and do their thing?
Yeah, exactly. It would, if it lost 20% of its roots, it's got to rebuild that 20%. Now, it's gone through a couple of droughts, Peter, so it may have set it back. And the solution then would be just to add water. So some supplementary irrigation.
Yep.
And again, I don't know what you've got, but, we're getting better and better images here in Sydney. So we're able to go out and look. Google Earth Pro is the same. Google Pro is taking more and more images. It's free to download, and you can use the time scale. Let me pull it up so you can see it. I won't get you to tell me where it is, for the privacy requirement, but close that down, and that one down, and that one down. I don't think I've disconnected you yet. No, that's pretty good. I thought I pulled up Google. Let's try it again. Google Earth Pro. Start the app. Oh, it's already running as why. Okay. So here's a project I'm looking at the moment. Go back, obviously I'm not going to get much before about 2003, but there we are, 2003. And each one of these sliders, which is open from down the bottom in Google Earth Pro, each one of those little lines is another image. Now, Google only shares a small number of these with you in Google Earth on the regular format. Here it's sharing you every image that's taken, and so you get a lot more images. This is good quality, so this is probably one that they've uploaded, but you can get information in each of these other images as well. And so, I can see, for example, construction work going on there, 2009. We're at ground level. 2011, we've finished the construction. And, I'm here because I want to see how much shade gets onto this tree. There's a fair bit of light on that tree at the moment beside the car park. Not much shade, but I wonder what it's like in wintertime. And so again, the 7th month, there we are. Now I can see in wintertime it gets a bit more shade. And so this is a useful tool for you if your area is covered by it. Now, I keep on doing local stuff, but I know that Peter lives up near Ballina. And so we'll zoom up to Ballina. I will ask it the same question. How many times has Google looked at Ballina? It's probably looked at it nowhere near as many times as that one that we just saw then. But it's still got quite a few, in fact. There's probably 30 or 40 impressions of Ballina. So if we wanted to zip down on a tree or a cluster of trees like this one here, we can indeed collect a fair bit of historic information about that tree. And that's free. It's nothing that's billed or charged. My understanding of it was there was a particular court case about Google's perhaps inappropriate acquisition of the software from a private entity group, and Google cannot charge for it. So it's a free forever piece of software.
Mark, I had the occasion to look for some aerial photos outside that time frame, and I was able to find some really good stuff from historical images. Do you know about that? Could you speak to that?
Yeah. So there's, depending on where you're at and depending on what you've got, there are a number of sources. So Trove is the federal library. It's not called the National Library. Sorry, National Library. It's digitizing all of its images and information it's got. Local historical societies will do the same, but there's also, at least in New South Wales, and again, I apologise that it's just New South Wales, but I'm sure the same is around. I have historic images here, and I'm sure that the same is available for other areas as well, but this is just one for New South Wales. Click OK, and you can see the distribution of this particular portal is that area there. And it's just great, again, to go back. I did it today, looked at a tree, and it came up as a tree that wasn't present in 1965. So I know that the tree's about 60 years old or so. 900 mils through, that's 15 millimeters in diameter. It needs 5 to 10 centimeters of, 5 to 10 millimeters of space around it for every year that it's going to grow. So we're going to put a driveway near it. And, the driveway needs to be a good 30 centimeters away from it. Otherwise, in 30 years' time, we're going to be pushing over the concrete. And so just to be able to provide that feedback was useful. So there will be equivalents elsewhere. Does that help, Peter?
Yeah. As you've just mentioned, I'm in Ballina, and I was able to access this particular service, and I was able to show that this tree that was supposed to have been a native and decades old just wasn't there not so long ago.
Peter, I confess I am just pathetic at aging trees. I've come to that conclusion. I'm forever amazed at how wrong I am, and I keep on getting these surprises both ways, where I think, oh yeah, that's a really young tree, and it'll come back as being something quite old. Or I say,
I have an anecdote about that. If if you
Yeah,
like
please.
to indulge me. So I had a property in Burringbar some years ago, and we had creek frontage, and there was a little swimming pool, lovely little pool there, and a track down to it, campers growing along the side of the bank, and lovely. So on the way down there, there was a Diplodocus australis, native tamarind, and I liked them, so I noticed it, and it had about 4 leaves on it. It was 100, 150 millimeters high, and it was there when I first bought the property, and 20 years later, it was still there, growing well. The people on the other side of the creek had chopped all their campers down, so they let some more light in. So in the last 6 or 8 years, it had been getting more light, and it had doubled in size. And when I left, it was about what would that be? Maybe 400 mil high. So I watched it for 20 odd years, and it was that high. I suspect it was, reasonably old when I first met it. So this tree that was, less than half a metre tall was at least 30 odd years old. I thought that was.
Oh, yeah. Look, one of the ones that I talk about is figs, and I'm just going to open up a Bellingen shot, Peter. I think you know the tree, and
Yeah.
The two figs of Bellingen are just amazing trees, and you don't get a sense of how big they are until you get down amongst them. And I've tried to figure out a way of communicating it to someone today. These are the two figs together, and if it gives you help, that's about 2 meters there between the base of the canopy and the grass below. Okay, so every bit of 60 meters plus in height. Two massive trees. They started their life as an epiphyte. You can see it in the construction of the trunk. So they're old figs. They started in the upper canopy, and it probably took the tree 40 or 50 years before the roots hit the ground and the canopy got above the surrounding trees. At that point in time, it would have gone crazy. But it was probably only a small tree for the first 40 or 50 years, maybe didn't have a trunk on it greater than maybe 200 mils. And then just slowly became crazy. And of course, it's now a massive tree. It's on private land. Lisa, you've been there and seen it, I believe, haven't you?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. It looks like Marty there, but you get an idea of the size of him versus the size of the buttress. They're just enormous trees. The two biggest Moreton Bay figs I know of by a long way. Unusually tall for a Moreton Bay fig, and that is because there was a rainforest area, and it took time for the trees to be the emergent species, but ficus will be the emergent species in that situation. In fact, Bellingen's so smart. At one stage, they had a council officer there who decided they wanted to get rid of the camphor laurels, and so they planted ficus in cavities in the camphor laurels to take over the camphor laurels, strangle them, and become the replacement trees. And I just thought that was brilliant. It's a shame
They've done that at the Wollongbar Research Station, I think it is, as well, on their campus down their driveway.
Excellent. I mean, it's just such a smart approach to doing things. So it shows you what we can do when we think about it. So does that answer your question, David, as far as your tree goes? David's on silent.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's been a good help. Thank you.
Yeah, and again,
gives me a few things to consider.
Yeah, these aren't absolutes, but I'd have that conversation about whether there is anything, once a year weeder or something that they use. People, I'm amazed how many times I've heard someone say, no, I don't use any herbicides, but I do use weed and feed.
Yeah.
As if it's not a herbicide. And it's my November special. November, everyone starts getting everything ready for Christmas. And, I go around and a tree's unusually subsiding. And I think, oh, dicamba, here we come. And I'm amazed at how many times that happens. And, 2 or 3 times every year at least, I get someone pay me to say, next time, make sure your lawn's really moist before you apply weed and feed, and follow the instructions. Try and keep away from the tree. And there are worse, as I said, once a year path weeders, for example, can be really quite bad. Well, those are the questions that.
Yeah, I'll ask a few more questions.
Go for it.
No, I'll ask my clients some
Our client, yep. Well, you can ask us more questions too, because I think that was all the questions from the floor. Is that right, Peter?
Right.
Yes,
just while
Matthew.
you're talking about figs, is there any tricks to propagating figs? I've just
Easy as hell. What do you want to grow? What sort?
Moreton Bay.
Moreton Bay. They aerial layering really easy. So an aerial layer is when you cut the bark off around or most of the way around, wrap it in something like a sphagnum or a peat moss, wrap that up, keep it moist, and you'll find new roots growing in there. They love bottom heat. So we have a cultivar here. It's an upright form of Moreton Bay, ficus upright, and we grow that just by taking a cutting, putting it with bottom heat at about 26 degrees, and putting it on the misting table, and it grows roots overnight. And not quite, but really does like it. So warm bottom heat really accelerates root development in ficus. Brachychiton rupestris. That should be in full leaf by now. Photographs attached. Okay, great. I can deal with that.
The PDF, yeah.
I'll expand it up as best as I can. First thing, it's hard to see, but I'm worried that these may be marquescent leaves. The great news is there's still a green cortex, so
Yeah.
I'm not at all worried about the survival. What you may have had happen
There's a couple more photos. There's 4 photos.
Parajong leaf tire. I'm wondering whether you've had problems with that. And these, the green to here, you've got this sort of orangey bit here, but it doesn't look like they're dead. So it look like you've got good buds. I wouldn't be worried about it. Brachychiton rupestris is abnormally deciduous, so it just goes deciduous when it likes. I wouldn't have a problem with it, particularly if it's had something like Currajong leaf tire go through. It'll just come out again another 4 or 6 weeks. You should start seeing some bud burst.
Did you see Currajong leaf
Tire. It's a lepidoptera that pulls the leaves together, and because these are very small, thin leaves, they really can have a fairly big impact in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah,
Whereas
I've seen that in previous years, but not this year. And there's a street tree 2 streets away, and it's in full leaf.
Yeah, and that's this bit about things being irregularly deciduous and irregular flowering. I was in a car the other day with a couple of arborists, and we were saying how wonderful it is when you see Brachychiton rupestris, Brachychiton acifolia, jacaranda, and Grevillea robusta all in flower at the same time with a full external flower. But, Grevilleas aren't that reliable, and Illawarra flame trees aren't that reliable. And so this is just in that category of something that's unreliable. But it appears as though we've got green tissue all the way out to the tips, and that gives me the encouraging belief that each of these nodes here where there was a leaf, there is a bud waiting to go. It's really formed. It was formed last year, So it's right to go. So
Okay.
just make sure they haven't done anything crazy, and it should come back in again. And
Okay.
I've had a brachychiton rupestris that we kept in a tub, in a small wine barrel style tub, probably about 24 centimeters across. And we kept it in that for about 12 to 15 years with no irrigation. And we planted it into the garden, and I guess it's taken 5 or 6 years, and it's finally got going really well. So yeah, it's just a thing of unusual timing, and we get a whole pile of plants that do that for us. So I wouldn't be panicking.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the floor?
Yeah, I've got a question, Mark. I just sent you through a couple of photos. I do have another one, which is even, anyway. My question is around tree lopping.
Yeah.
So we are told that one of the reasons tree lopping is bad is that the resulting shoots turn into branches, are weakly attached, and so more likely to fail, and therefore a problem. They're dangerous. But I've been thinking about it and wondering if we have any actual data on that, because we know of other tree features that look kind of interesting and do have an increased level of failure associated with them, but aren't actually all that concerning. And I know that we've stopped lopping so much in Australia, not so much in places overseas, as you can see. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Look, it's the baby with the bathwater. The aim of trying to stop lopping was to stop just indiscriminate cutting of little and no value. If you talk about lopping, the bigger problem arises when you make large cuts, not small cuts. So if your average cut was 2 to 5 centimeters, it wouldn't be an issue. If your cut's 10 to 20 centimeters, it becomes more of an issue. So cut becomes a real big issue. And that's one of the reasons why pollarding is so successful. Is all that you're ever cutting off is 1 or 2 year old material. Well, if you just cut 1 or 2 year old material off a tree, it'd be called reduction pruning. And so I think that's important. There's an interesting post talking about reduction pruning by David Evans recently on one of the forums. And David made the comment that we've got to stop talking about weight reduction. And I think someone raised that last time round. And I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that it is load reduction and not weight reduction that we are doing. And it's, interestingly, it's the canopy of the tree, not the crown of the tree. Crown's a collective term. Canopy is the singular that we're talking about. And it's just about precision in communication. So, yes, look, I think one of the problems that we did is we took away a valuable management tool, Peter, that could be used in the right circumstance.
Were you able to find those photos?
I've tried opening several times. Have you definitely sent them to me?
Yeah,
Which email address?
I think I
Mark
have.
out? Yep, here it is, tree lopping. Yeah, look, I mean, probably a little bit more severe than I would like. But this looks like Vietnam.
It is. It's Ho Chi
Yeah.
Minh City.
And, you know, other than it being more severe, it really is just a form of reduction pruning. It's just non-nodal cutting. You know, if we could make nodal cuts, would be better. And one of the, let me pull this up if I can, one of the best reduction jobs I know of is done by an arborist in New Zealand, Birkenhead, New Zealand. Adelaide, New Zealand. This tree here has been reduced for more than 20 years. It's always a nodal cut. Great work, just amazing. Every now and again, something will have to come back down, so new stuff can come back up and be reduced again. Same thing used to be done, I don't know whether it still is, Stanford University with Pittosporum undulatum. You'd bring down, you'd let enough light in to let suckers develop from below, you'd bring down the outer canopy, let the new suckers become the canopy, and repeat the process and repeat the process. So there is not a non-nodal cut in that tree, and that probably has increased in the time that I've known it, maybe 200 mils. And I've known it for 20-something rather years, 30-something rather than 20 at least. So, you know, as I said, if you had a choice and you just indiscriminately, non-nodally cut to 4 or 5 centimetre diameter branches, by the time you're getting branches failing, and there will be some that fail at that sort of regrowth, they'll only be 1 centimetre or 2 centimetres in diameter. And I've said before, you know, being hit by a 2 centimetre branch is almost never going to be serious.
So that idea, you're saying that idea of the encouragement of these weakly attached branches probably isn't really a thing.
It's more, you know, and Greg Moore's talked about this. Rapidly growing epicormic branches are the big problem. Remembering all branches by definition are epicormic. You know, I'm not going to argue the point, but the bud is not connected to the pith, so it has to be by virtue epicormic. So if a branch is epicormic, it's not a problem. If it's growing proportionally to the stem that it's attached, the problem becomes when you cut through a big piece or you get fire damage, and all of a sudden you get a new branch, you've got all that stored energy in the tree, and you get a new branch that's 5-6 meters long, 100 mils in diameter in 1 year or 2 years, that with a very acute angle, that becomes the more problematic. Up until 20 or so years ago, this high pollarding, or going through and cutting the tree back to smaller branches, was a common technique used in the UK. And Mike Ellison often talks about how just doing away with that has, for example, had all sorts of issues in terms of matrix suction in their highly reactive clays. So that now you've got these trees that, instead of being kept under balance and not having too much canopy, now have huge canopies and now suck so much water that there's a massive differential within the year. So I think it's one of those ones where, done appropriately, non-nodal cutting is not the end of the world. I don't think it's the best option. I think proper reduction is the best option, but I'm not against non-nodal reduction rather than getting rid of the tree. I'd rather see...
I think it's ugly, but that's an entirely different matter.
Yeah, you say that, and I tend to agree, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. And I'll put you up some photographs.
That's just my opinion.
Well, you're right, it is ugly, but ugly's got different things from different perspectives. And I'd like to show you a couple of transplant shots that might, somewhere there it says Thailand, Thai trees, yeah. This is the way transplants are done. We've talked about this before. These are called trunk transplants. And go and open up, you lazy thing. And that's not particularly pretty. I think we'd all agree with that, yeah? But the alternative is you cut that tree down, you get rid of it altogether. And whilst that might sound ridiculous, when you put these trees together, and I can show you, and I will show you in a few more seconds, these trees in situ in final planting 5 and 10 years after they've been planted, to the average eye, they can't see it. And for me, and I've said this before, if someone would be nice enough to bring me a big trunk like this, so I could have it outside my office window, I think that would be wonderful. I have no problems with that. Rather that than the loss of the thing altogether. I think that's just a great sculpture created by nature. So not my preferred option again, but rather than nothing, it's not a bad option. And so they look ghastly, they really do. But let me show you what they can do. And you'll have to excuse, I've got to go to a whole different section to show you what they look like when they've been finished. And we need cover. So that's the photograph you just saw. Let me open it in a different viewer. Let's see, maybe we'll do it there. Yeah, it will. Excuse the angle, but that's one of the trees planted. How about this forest here? That looks lovely. You know, here's a resort in the middle of a rainforest. No, it ain't. It's a man-made rainforest out of trees that were just simply hacked back. But in 40 or 50 years' time, they won't be any different than a forest that got hit by a microburst. Identical. So, you know, or a tree that got knocked back severely from something and the tip side back and then it had to rebuild itself. It'd be the same. So I'm not suggesting that's our ideal option. I'm just saying we've got to think differently. There's no way you could have moved this down the road. That's a transplant. These are transplants, you know, and it just gives the place a sense of scale. You know, again, ugly as all hell, but beautiful. I want that outside my office. Someone wants to bring me a nice big ficus with the roots attached. I don't need much roots. That was probably moved with a 2-meter root ball. But in 20, 30, 40 years' time, 9 out of 10 people won't notice the difference, and anybody seeing it would say, oh, what a wonderful old tree. So, yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't think that we should aim at lopping as our first choice, but I think we should consider it as a last-ditch option. And I know that many years ago, I got embroiled with the Lehman Street debacle. And in hindsight, my view would be lopping those trees would have been a lot better than cutting the trees down. If you think about it, if you haven't been to Sydney, and in your elms in Melbourne, they've all been lopped at some stage, and nearly all of them. Our Ficus microcarpa hillii right through the eastern suburbs has been lopped. As a young arborist, I remember tendering on a project to cut back the trees under the wires and then balance prune on the other side. And by balance prune, they meant when you went up under the wires, you stood in the first fork, you turned around with the chainsaw and you cut everything off. And then you climbed down with your spikes, ran across the road to the other side, climbed up the next tree, stood in the first fork, turned around and cut all the branches off as well. And if you look at places like Wallara, hundreds and hundreds of their figs have been lopped like that. No one's going around and saying, look, we've got to get rid of them. So I'm not suggesting that it's the first option, but I am suggesting it's an option we shouldn't completely eliminate.
I think we've turned our faces against lopping pretty severely in Australia in the last few years?
I think it's one of those things that we'll probably see some recorrections on when the standard gets for tree pruning gets reconsidered. Because things like coronet cutting is completely unacceptable in many ways, and yet it's an acceptable environmental pruning technique. So I suspect that we won't be as inclined to throw it away. Having said that, and I'm just looking at my photographs, thinking, this is northern Thailand, Chiang Mai, and you see trees like this in a city. Doesn't want to show up there. I've got to go to find where it is. If you cut that up down here, in my mind, it should be flogged. So it's putting it into a balance. This tree wants to be big, but look at it. It has been cut back. 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 Anyone not agree that that's a beautiful tree?
Mm.
I'd have it tomorrow. So again, more common in Asia than it is in Australia, and eucalypts aren't a good candidate for doing it. Okay, so at least many species of eucalypts aren't good candidates for that sort of work.
Why not? Why not?
It's interesting, Peter. I think it's the way that they produce, or the way they respond to injury, is not as good as if you're doing that with Syzygium or with Waterhausia or Jacaranda.
So you're saying we don't get as good a regrowth response?
Yeah, look, things that have all their foliage out the end are different than trees with all their foliage dispersed. So I think now, having said that, if you go down, and I'll be very careful on this, if you go down to Hyde Park, the Ficus microcarpa have been pruned right up, and all the internal and lower foliage is gone. And that creates equal problems back the other way. In fact, if I had a choice, I'd rather reduction pruning than canopy raising any day.
Mm.
If you reduce the canopy and it starts to thicken up like this has in here, I can rebuild this because I can take out there and take out here. I can reduce back here. I can reduce back there. I can make this a smaller lollipop. Once I've raised it, there's nothing to work with below. And that's a part of the issue I see with eucalypts, Peter, is something like a Citriodora often doesn't have anything in that you can really work to much more than about 1 metre or 2 metres in.
Mm.
Having said that, and we'll pull it up. Some of you might know Ben Aberlevin. Ben's an arborist here in Sydney. And Ben, I'm trying to think of where he lives. Isn't that hopeless? If I put in his code into the world, he's not there, but I'll find it from there. His code. I'll show you a Ben reduction pruning that's been going on for Heathcote, New South Wales. Communicate to these things intelligently because I'm not. Helensburgh, thank you. Helensdrg. Ben has an idea of putting a tree house in a tree, and so Ben has been reducing a eucalyptus, and I'm hoping I can find it fairly quickly, but it doesn't look as though I will.
Helensburgh has a URG, Helensburgh.
Sorry?
Helensburgh is spelt with a U.
Thank you. Never trust my spelling.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that's brilliant pruning for anyone that wants to have a go at doing things intelligently. Summer shade, winter sun, outline to the building, not overhanging. And, Europe is the place where you can see that sort of thing happening all the time. Europe just so much better at doing those things. NSW. Yeah, so this tree's been reduced 3 times now, and that's a eucalypt. But he's opened it up enough that you can get the foliage in down low. These things are starting to come up. You've got some suckering coming in from lower down, and so you can start building it back up. And you'll notice again that almost all of his cuts are small. So, and Ben's just a master of being able to do that sort of work. Another one that's like that's Kai Barnes, Southern Highlands of New South Wales. You see some really great reduction pruning, and you think, so this is a good example of what you can do with the eucalypt if you want to put the effort in. But it's not a one-up, cut it back and never worry about it. This is a project for him to keep that as a structure that would probably only ever be 20 or 30% taller than that. And he'll probably prune it every 2 or 3 years. Make good sense, Peter?
Yeah.
So that's what we would like, ideally, if we were training the Vietnamese workers what to do. We'd aim at something like that.
Yeah, I think that this idea that some activity, some option is bad, so never do it again. When I first started cutting trees, we would routinely lop trees and leave stubs, and we went away from doing that to the point where it's just not used at all. And I do recall being asked to quote on a job to prune branches off a part of the Pacific Highway because they didn't want overhanging branches, and I didn't get the job, but I watched with interest the people who did do it, and they went through and did a terrible job, in my opinion, because they left stubs everywhere, and I was horrified. I thought that was just completely the wrong thing to do. It was going to be a complete disaster. But now, 30 years later, you go and look at those trees, and those stubs have formed hollows everywhere, and there's all these things living in them. So
Yeah.
I just think that the more I know, the less I actually know, if you know what I mean.
Yep. So I've pulled up some photographs that might help raise that issue. And this is the tornado that hit Kurnell. Not all those trees were removed. A whole pile of them have regrown. What's the difference between them having their ends broken and regrowing and having them fire damaged and regrowing? Can anyone tell me?
The wounds are probably have a slightly larger surface area.
Yep, that's about it. So it's fascinating to my mind of thinking that we get caught up in these things. Here's a tree, it's lost most of its canopy. Of course, it probably got cut down, and that was one of the things that in the aftermath of Kurnell, a group of us went down there, and there were people cutting down trees everywhere that weren't damaged by the storm. And you know what they were saying? They were saying, well, it didn't damage the tree and it didn't damage our house this time, but we need to get rid of the tree in case there's another tornado like that. Okay, you just got hit by a 1 in 1,000 event. It didn't damage your tree. The tree helped protect your house. Now you want to get rid of the protection. And that's just, unfortunately, I hate to say it's the way that dumb people think. And, it's interesting here. We've got araucarias with codominant stems, not failed. We've got araucarias without codominant stems with their tops broken out. So you can see it's just not what we expect at all. And we saw in that situation, one of the worst damaged houses wasn't damaged by a tree. What do you think it was damaged by?
Alcohol?
No, wind, just pure. The desalination plant was completely destroyed by the tornado. You didn't have to get hit by a tree. One of the advantages of trees is they slow the winds. Every one of those trees in that ghastly shot that I had up there earlier, each one of these trees have absorbed energy, and that energy has been transferred to the ground and transferred to breaking of parts. By the way, there you see a palm that failed, it completely snapped. You see really nice wood samples, as you can see, so a whole pile of microscopic shots. But all of these trees were absorbing energy. All of these trees were catching debris. All of these trees were a benefit. And so, it makes good sense. The way you'd treat a soldier who went to war to protect you is you'd wait for him to come home and then kill him. And so you didn't die, but we better make sure next time that you do, so we'll kill you now. And that's what we're doing to the trees. We're saying, look, you've done your job of taking all that energy, all that wind, so you've done a great job. So let's just make sure next time you don't do that job, we'll kill you now. It's absurd. It's absolute idiotic thinking, and yet that's how we think in that process. In that case, it's just a verge, and I'll wager you, if you head down to Cornell, most of those trees that weren't in or immediately beside public roads were left to regrow just as they are after a fire. And yep, same, got to go through all the same processes. So yeah, I think, Peter, I'm not suggesting we do it, but if I was to try and rebuild this tree, I'd probably cut here and cut here and cut. I wouldn't cut that. It's got some green. Cut there and there. Cut here. Just get rid of some of those stubs and shorten them down, and try and make an angled cut, a reduction cut. And the reason I want to make a reduction cut is I'm hoping that the branch that grows from the furthest out point will become the dominant branch, and it will produce tissue and cover over. So a reduction cut is the cut to make, because there actually is a bud there. That's what we're going to see come back. We're going to see a meristematic trace that will develop a bud. So we're realistically making it as if we'd reduced it to that having already come back. And so try not to do straight transverse cuts. Angle them at about 45 degrees. That got you guys?
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks all.
Can I ask a question? Is there enough time?
You did. Do you want to ask another one? That's fine. Go ahead.
I just want to, I'm doing quite a few projects that have bushfire zones on them. And I'm just wondering, should I be going to do another course to get some more knowledge with that? I mean, I'm getting bushfire reports, biodiversity reports, but I'm doing quite a lot of them.
I think there's probably some advantage in it. From my side, the frustration with bushfire reports and the code is the code says should, and interpreters read shall. And people read the same thing. So if I had a pinus or a Pressus beside my house, I would think very differently about that tree than if I had a casuarina beside my house. Casuarina won't ignite. The pinus will. And I see this treating of all trees the same and not thinking things through. So I did a development 18 months or so ago where the person decided to use steel roof, steel trusses, a half space, so they were extra tight, extra strong. And the council said, oh, you can't have a branch overhanging the roof. And so we got together with the fire consultant, and the fire consultant said, well, yes, it's because the branch may break and penetrate through the roof, and cause the house to burn down. Now, my response to it was, good luck. You know, that's just such an absurd scenario. Tile roof, I get, but a metal roof with half spacing on your trusses, not likely to be an issue at all. Let the tree overhang the roof. And when the fire comes through, it's going to burn the leaves. You're not going to have, in general, huge branches break off. Yes, I know often our bad fires are during really windy conditions, but now you're wanting two things to happen at once. You're wanting enough load to break the branch, but you want the foliage burnt off by the fire. You can't have it both ways. You can only have one of the two in the scenario, and yet the fire consultant was absolutely bent on the fact that if the branch dropped, it would break through the roof and the building would catch alight. So I think, yes, answer, Vicky, is if you can tolerate more crap and more bureaucracy, it's worthwhile having a look at it, because I think there are a lot of people that deal with trees that simply say, look, there's no point taking any risk, not worth it. Let's just get rid of the tree. So I've seen camellias beside a house removed because they might ignite. Good luck.
The property we work on down here, Mark, the fire consultant had been through and declared that the cocos palms needed to be removed for the fire danger.
Yeah.
I said, well, come to our burn pile and make the stuff burn, would you? Because you can't, just won't burn.
Right. On the other hand, cotton palms, in
Yeah.
my mind, can be skinned. So not pruned, but skinned. So that is taking it right back to the trunk.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's certainly, Vicky, it's another feather in the hat. I'm a tree fanatic, so I can't be bothered with all that other garbage. You know, there's an arborist here in Sydney who's doing town planning degree. I can see the benefit of that. Just not for me. If I were to do any further studies, I'd do urban forestry, and I think that's just because we're decades behind in urban forestry in Australia, sadly to say. And I think there's likely to be some upsurge in that in the next 10 years or so, one way or another. I'm hoping so anyhow.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. I'll see you guys when Peter's got a schedule next, which, Peter, is when?
The second Tuesday of the month, which is, I have no idea.